there is no fate but what we make. So we decided to make a video about the details you may have missed in the Terminator series. The future is not set, and we don't know where the franchise will take us going forward, but join ScreenRant as we journey, fully clothed, into the past and look at all the Easter eggs, tiny references, and minor mistakes that passed the scrutinizing red gaze of Skynet's finest and made it into the finished films. You might be surprised to learn that Arnold only speaks 58 words in the entirety of the first Terminator film. That said, he gets to utter the single most iconic line,
"I'll be back."
It made such an impression that "I'll be back" was the "I have a bad feeling about this" of the Terminator franchise, spoken in every movie. In Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Arnold says,
"Stay here. I'll be back."
In Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, Arnie refers to the villainous TX robot, saying,
"She'll be back."
He later says,
"I'm back."
Christian Bale's John Connor says, "I'll be back" in Terminator Salvation.
I'll be back.
Terminator Genesis features two "I'll be backs," one spoken by the Guardian,
"I'll be back."
What?
the other spoken by Kyle Reese before he time travels. Although there, Kyle says,
I'll go back.
in Dark Fate, the battle-weary Sarah Connor is given the classic line. After appearing in 2 Terminator films, marrying and divorcing the franchise's creator, and taking a 28-year break from the role of Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton came back for more. But it may not have been too hard to get back into character, and she still has battle scars from the first 2 films to prove it. Particularly, Linda Hamilton injured her foot, damaging ligaments and gaining a fracture. You may notice her limping through several action scenes in the 1984 film. Production adjusted the shooting schedule, and Linda's ankle and foot were wrapped up each day. Cameron then justified the hitch in her step by creating a backstory where Sarah Connor had injured herself in a figure skating accident years before. In the 1991 film, Hamilton underwent a massive body transformation to show Sarah Connor's evolution as an anti-Skynet revolutionary. Israeli military veteran Uzi Gal helped train Hamilton prior to filming. She also learned how to actually pick a lock. Her skills were so on point that much of her lockpicking footage was deleted by the British Board of Film Classification in advance of the UK release. While much effort went into the special effects needed to make Arnold Schwarzenegger look like an unstoppable robot, eagle-eyed fans can spot the location of hidden wires on Arnie's body in Terminator and Terminator 2. In the first film, Arnold wore a power pack hidden under his sleeve to make sure the laser sight would function on the weapon he bears during the famous Technoir scene. In T2, when Arnold shows off his mechanical arm to the Dyson family, you can see a bulge on the right side of Arnold's chest. This bulge is the wire controlling the skeletal metal appendage.
Now listen to me very carefully.
In the early 1980s, Arnold Schwarzenegger was fresh off the success of the Conan films, but Hollywood still didn't know what to make of the towering Austrian. For the original Terminator, the studio initially suggested O.J. Simpson to play the unfeeling monster machine, but ironically, that seemed out of character for the beloved football star. James Cameron originally wanted a more unassuming actor in the Terminator role. The Terminator was supposed to be able to infiltrate society, blending in before revealing itself to its victims. Cameron pursued genre favorite Lance Henriksen for the Terminator role. The actor didn't get that part, but he does play doomed detective Hal Vukovich in the finished film. He then went on to appear as Bishop in Cameron's Alien sequels. Shockingly, if Henriksen ended up playing the T-800, Schwarzenegger would have played Kyle Reese. Who could forget the factory at the end of the first Terminator? Apparently, Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese did. While it's the place where Sarah defeated the T-800 and Reese lost his life, they seem to have missed the fact that this factory is owned by Cyberdyne Systems. It's the reason that Cyberdyne has the pieces of the first Terminator in their possession during Terminator 2. In sequences that were cut from the first movie, an entire subplot was devoted to Sarah and Kyle's efforts to destroy the Cyberdyne-owned factory in the hopes that it will change the future and stop Judgment Day from happening. Cameron later used this subplot for T2 Judgment Day. You might not know that in Hollywood, some of the most famous stars have non-actor twins. Scarlett Johansson and Ashton Kutcher each have twin siblings who prefer to stay out of the limelight. Linda Hamilton also belongs to this exclusive club. Her identical twin, Leslie Hamilton Guerin, appears in Terminator 2 during the sequence when the liquid metal T-1000 shapeshifts into her and two Sarah Connors share the screen. She also portrayed Sarah's mirror image in a deleted sequence. T2 proved to be a family affair. Linda Hamilton's sister co-stars in a minor role. Linda will go on to marry James Cameron, and her young son plays young John during the playground scene. During the motorcycle and truck chase through the dry LA riverbed, Arnie operated his weapon without a glove. This caused his skin to get caught repeatedly in the firearm's mechanism. Too bad this scene didn't take place after he ripped his forearm open to show his metal arm off to the Dyson family. That way, Arnie would have been wearing a glove during this entire sequence. James Cameron is widely known for his perfectionism. His demands have been known to drive his actors and crew members crazy. Still, that doesn't mean his movies are without mistakes. Take the scene toward the end of the sequence set in the hospital for the criminally insane. When Arnold blows the T-1000's head apart, if you pause that footage and watch it frame by frame, you'll see that during the shot when the T-1000's head bursts open, the model used in place of actor Robert Patrick is already partially split open before we even hear Arnold's shot. While James Cameron had a definitive vision for both of the Terminator films that he directed, he wasn't exactly sure how T2 should end.
I need a vacation.
The finale that ultimately made it into the theatrical release, Sarah narrates her final thoughts while the lines of a road pass underneath us. In the alternate ending, only shown on special releases of the film, the time jumps 30 years into the future. Sarah sits by a playground in a futuristic version of Washington, D.C. There, she watches John, now a congressman, play with her granddaughter. She speaks into a recording device, because smartphones didn't exist yet, and fills us in on the positive events of this future. It's a happy ending that would have made most of the sequels moot. The challenge of casting Terminator 2 came in finding the perfect kid to play young John Connor. Casting director Mally Finn found the best actor for the part when she came across Eddie Furlong in Pasadena, California. He hadn't necessarily planned to become an actor, he just seemed like a real kid who could take care of himself. Frankly, he was a little punk, even going so far as to call Mally Frog Lips. She brought him to Cameron, and the rest is history. What the filmmakers couldn't account for is how much Furlong would grow during filming. He aged a decent amount between the desert scenes and the movie's other sequences, and his cracking voice meant that a portion of his dialogue was redubbed in post-production. Technoir isn't just the name of the nightclub where Sarah Connor first encounters the Terminator in the 1984 film. It's also a nod to the genre that James Cameron and producer Gail Ann Hurd felt they had a hand in popularizing. Technoir, as a genre, encompasses gritty, violent stories with futuristic sci-fi elements, often showcasing the negative impact that technological advances have on the world. Before Terminator, a perfect example of a Technoir film would be Blade Runner. As a side note, the reason Sarah goes to the Technoir nightclub is because her date canceled on her. In the earlier scene where Sarah listens to her date's message on her answering machine, the man's voice belongs to none other than James Cameron himself. During the filming of Arnold's introductory scene in T2, a woman just happens to enter the biker bar set, mistaking it for an actual drinking establishment. Upon seeing Schwarzenegger on set, wearing nothing but his underwear, she asked if he was a male stripper. This lady might have been living under a rock when it came to recognizing world-famous action superstars, but she inspired Arnold's first scene in Terminator 3. There, he shows up to a nightclub and gets mistaken for a male stripper.
You're supposed to go around to the back.
In a moment that's basically Magic Mike meets Commando. In the future, after Skynet takes over, the Resistance doesn't seem to have much in the way of electricity, but the production of Terminator 2 appeared to have a blank check when it came to the electric bill. When filming the freeway chase, in which the T-1000 pursues our heroes in a truck carrying liquid nitrogen, all the wiring for the lightning rigs illuminating the freeway was stolen. So the filmmakers were forced to rent cables that would help them light 5 miles of freeway during the 5-day shoot. In another instance of last-minute thinking, during principal photography for the first Terminator, the production team provided a ton of atmospheric fog by spraying a bunch of cans of bug spray. It wasn't healthy, but it sure looked great. When we think of Schwarzenegger, we often think about getting to the chopper, but helicopters are often one of the more dangerous aspects of Hollywood stunts. While T2 revolutionized special effects, the sequence where the helicopter pursuing our heroes flies under an overpass during the climactic chase scene was filmed with an actual helicopter. The stunt was completed by pilot Charles A. Tamburo. While the cameraman refused to participate in the stunt, deeming it too dangerous to be near a speeding, low-flying helicopter, James Cameron decided to handle the camera work himself. He filmed an up-close shot that made the film that much more memorable. During the climactic chase in the first Terminator film, Sarah and Kyle flee the T-800 and enter a factory, the unnamed Cyberdyne facility. In getting there, they run from a giant tractor trailer. This truck gets a shout out earlier in the movie. When the Terminator goes to terminate the wrong Sarah Connor, his car runs over a toy semi-truck. This is a toy version of the full-size model that chases after Kyle and Sarah at the end of the film. And when the semi-truck explodes near the end of the film, the special effects team blew up a large model. Speaking of trucks, several modifications needed to be made to the truck involved in the chase through the concrete LA riverbed in Terminator 2. While the crew was preparing to film the chase, Cameron noticed that the roof of the semi-truck's cabin needed to be yanked off. The truck was just too tall to make it under the overpass in one piece. That last-minute decision to remove the roof helped to sell the ferocity of the T-1000's relentless pursuit. You might remember that, before the roof came off, the windshield was removed. Yep. The windshield of the truck gets pushed out by the T-1000 while he drives, but in a later shot, the windshield appears to be intact and back on the truck. This blooper was fixed by Cameron in the 3D re-release of Terminator 2. When watching some of Arnold's filmography, you might experience deja vu, or perhaps even total recall.
You're the same. No matter where you go, there you are. It's always the same old you.
In Terminator 2, Arnold uses the same weaponry he used in Predator, a long-barreled weapon that the hulking actor was strong enough to lug around. Perhaps in the same way actors like to work with the same scene partners movie after movie, Schwarzenegger loved working with this particular weapon so much, he just had to find a way to use it again. Reportedly, he trained himself so well for these films that he can assemble complex weapons with multiple parts while he's blindfolded. The red, grainy view through which we saw the Terminator's field of vision must have seemed like a big special effect to audiences in 1984, but you might be surprised to learn that this red Terminator vision wasn't developed exclusively for the film. When looking at the scrolling text that appears on the side of the red-tinted point-of-view shots, you might notice that this is the code used by the Apple II OS. If you're lucky enough to have an Apple II operating system in your possession, enter the following command: closed bracket, the word call, -151, asterisk, and the letter P, and you too can be looking at the world like a Terminator in no time. If you saw Terminator 2 at a certain age, you may have been plagued by world-ending, apocalyptic nightmares, and let's be honest, that certain age is probably any age. The idea of a gigantic mushrooming explosion is horrifying to most people. In order to get the effect just right, the optical effects team studied the government's old test footage of early atomic blasts to make Sarah's nuclear nightmare as haunting as possible. Without CGI, the slow-motion footage of a miniature LA made of crackers and other flammable objects burning in a devastating shockwave still shocks us. At the time, it was considered so realistic that members of the US government considered it to be the most believable nuclear blast using practical effects to ever be put to film. In the Terminator franchise, the robots are unfeeling creatures who execute their logic with cold precision. Yet some critics believe the forces fighting for humanity display a lot of Christian symbolism. One of the parallels between the Terminator stories and Christianity is the fact that both John Connor and Jesus Christ have the same initials, and they're considered the saviors of mankind. Both figures have supernatural fathers. One is believed by many to be the Son of God while also being God himself. The other sends his own father to the past to conceive himself.
It messes with your head.
To take this one step further, during T2's flash-forward future sequence, some fans say the scars on John Connor's face look a lot like angels' wings. Grace from Terminator Dark Fate isn't the only half-machine character who needs sustenance. The Terminator eats too. Sure, it may have seemed weird to see the T-800 eat food in Terminator 3, but apparently James Cameron planned to introduce the idea of hungry Terminators much earlier in the franchise. According to Cameron's lore, the Terminators ate so that their outer layer of organic skin wouldn't start decomposing. This was ultimately deleted from the earlier Terminator installments. According to interviews and commentary tracks, James Cameron's initial idea came from a fever dream. The director imagined a skeletal robot relentlessly chasing after its prey. The rest of the story blossomed from that single image. However, Cameron was eventually sued by Harlan Ellison for plagiarism. Ellison, the celebrated sci-fi writer, had penned an episode of the classic anthology series The Outer Limits named Soldier, and Ellison had previously published a tale called Soldier from Tomorrow. Cameron considered Ellison to be a parasite, but he and the production company reached an out-of-court agreement with Ellison, eventually acknowledging some basic similarities between the stories. While the two conflicting Terminators in T2 are so iconic for their physical differences, unique fighting styles, and contrasting personas, the film is often remembered for the clashes between both cyborgs. But did you notice that the T-1000 and T-800 didn't exchange dialogue with each other? Would this have been different if Billy Idol played the T-1000, as had originally been planned? Apparently, the 80s rock star was Cameron's top choice for the T-1000, and he would have brought a different kind of star power to the role. Yet, Idol got into a motorcycle accident and couldn't take on the part. Robert Patrick, who has a similar build to Idol, was cast in the rock star's place. He was able to put his own quiet and creepy spin on the role. There's only a 1 out of 365 chance that you're watching this video on Christmas Day. But imagine how the Terminator 2 production team and the cast felt when they were called into work on the 25th of December. On a day where production normally comes to a halt, James Cameron called an emergency shooting session to film the moment when Arnold's T-800 turns back on after the T-1000 turned it off. Cameron felt this moment was needed so the audience would get why Arnold was able to come back and ultimately take out the T-1000. After Dark Fate, has the franchise been terminated, or will there be more stories about unfeeling robots hunting their way through the past, present, and future? Let us know in the comments section, and subscribe to ScreenRant for more eye-opening videos like this one. We'll be back. Until then, hasta la vista, baby.